Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's SBA COVID Recoveries Program. We are pleased to have Virginia Smith from the SBA office right here close to us in Rochester with us today. Virginia's been fantastic throughout all of this COVID the COVID recovery time. And even prior to that, we worked with Virginia on things well before COVID happened. She's a great partner here in Livingston County and a great resource for businesses here. And we're pleased to have her here with us today to provide a recap on all of the COVID funding programs that are available currently through the SBA and some recent new ones that have come on board with the Restaurant Recovery Fund. So with that, before I turn it over to Virginia, just a couple of housekeeping things. Along the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see a panel that provides for a chat feature. You can submit questions in the general chat, or you can submit them in the Q&A feature as well. We will be monitoring those throughout the session, and as they're timely, if we don't bring them up during the actual presentation, we'll hit all of the Q&A at the end before we come out of the presentation mode and back to the floor. When we do come out of presentation mode and back to the floor, Virginia will be available. We are scheduled until 10 a.m. this morning. So Virginia will be available at the tables, just as if we were live and in person. You can pop over at a table and have conversations with her and ask for follow-up questions, or just have conversations with other folks and network as you would at a normal in-person chamber function. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Virginia, who will share her screen and get started.
Good morning, Laura. Thank you for the continued partnership that we've had. We've done some pretty cool things for sure, but right now we're gonna COVID programs so we can get started. One of the things that we want to make sure of is getting you the most up-to-date information, and the Livingston County Chamber is fantastic with that. So if you aren't a member yet, or you are just participating in this program today, please make sure that you continue to work with them. So we're going to talk about the SBA COVID-19, our economic aid overview. Just as a caveat, this is current as of today. Things constantly change, as we're well aware of over the past year and a half. So we want to just keep you informed and let you know that as of today, this is the information I'm going to give you. Tomorrow might be slightly different. We're going to talk about where we are and what are the different funding options that you have. I tend to talk in acronyms, so I'll apologize right now, but we have the EIDL program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the PPP loan, which is the Paycheck Protection Program. Then we also have our Shuttered Venue Operator Grant, and most recently our Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So those are going to be our focuses for today. This is a pretty broad spectrum overview. A lot of these programs have already been in place, but if you have specific questions, I'm here to answer if I can, and if not, we'll connect at another time to make sure that you get the right information. So this is just a really pretty chart that someone in our graphics department put together. You have the loan programs, and then we also have a section that we have the grant programs. And as we're aware, the loan programs have to be repaid, not if you meet certain criteria, and the grant programs are what they're called. They're grants. For the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, for those of you who have applied, they're still there. We actually now can accept increases. So if you would like to increase your EIDL loan, you can go back into your portal and ask for an increase. That would be in there. For those of you who have not yet applied, please do so. You have actually until December 31st of this year. You can use those funds for working capital or operating expenses. The terms are 3.75 for businesses, 2.75 for nonprofits, 30 years, no prepayment penalties, and we secure them by UCC filing. Anybody who is a small business, a cooperative with 500 or fewer employees is eligible for this. One of the keys that you should also know is you don't have any penalty, or excuse me, you don't have to make any payments on these loans for 12 months. There is a program now that's new. It's called the Targeted EIDL Advance. And if you are eligible for this program, SBA is actually going to be contacting you. So I'm just getting you this information out. If you have not yet received an email and you believe you should be eligible, we would ask you to contact our Office of Disaster Assistance. These are targeted advances which do not need to be paid back. For businesses that are located in a low-income community, have suffered greater than a 30% economic loss, and have 300 or fewer employees. If you meet the above, if we have funding, it will balance out the previous EIDL advance to a full $10,000. So some of you may have only received, say, $2,000 because you only had 2 employees. This will allow you to receive an additional 8 from the first round, and potentially an additional $10,000, but for those who didn't receive the funds. So again, for this, if you feel like your target, you are eligible. The key with SBA is to make sure that our emails are not going to your spam filter, and that if you received an email, to promptly reply to it, or if you think you should have and you haven't yet, you can contact our Office of Disaster Assistance. Okay. PPP loans, Paycheck Protection loans. There are still some businesses out there who have never applied for a Paycheck Protection loan. So you can still apply for a first draw. The last day that lenders will accept this application is at the end of May. So you have exactly 1 month. If you are looking for a first draw loan, you have to have it in business February 15th, 2020. You can use the funds to cover any time between 8 and 24 weeks. And really the majority of businesses are eligible for this. Whether you're a sole proprietor or a DBA, you're eligible. During the Economic Aid Act, we actually increased the amount of eligible expenses that you can have for this. So it is a loan, but if you spend the funds on eligible expenses, you don't have to pay it back. And the eligible expenses are payroll, rent, utilities, PPE, and there's a few other ones. But the idea is that if you can supply those and prove that you spent them on eligible expenses, you won't owe the money back. And this date is wrong. I apologize. You have to apply before May 31st, 2021. So say you already had a PPP and you spent the money, or you're going to spend the money, you can actually apply for a second draw, but only if you have less than 300 employees and you suffered a 25% reduction in your gross receipts. So that's going to be the key with this one, is you can apply for a second draw. Now I get a lot of questions because businesses say, I got my PPP loan and I'm going to spend the money. I'm going to spend the money on everything forgiven, but I haven't quite spent it yet. But I don't want to miss out on applying for a second draw. What do I do? So the application for a second draw only requires that you certify that you have spent the funds in a forgivable way prior to the second draw money hitting your bank account. All right. So it's a timing issue. You should work with your local lender on that. This is pretty simple, the process. I just kind of wanted to explain it. And again, it's May 31st, it's the deadline. May 31st is the deadline. So first you find a lender. If you don't currently have a lender, we have the ability to either go to sba.gov/lender match, or you can go to the Paycheck Protection website and find a lender. There's an application. It all goes through the lender. And the lender submits the application electronically to SBA. So the PPP program goes through the lender. So going back, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is through SBA's website, but the Paycheck Protection Loan goes directly through your local lender. There are forgiveness. Again, we talked about that. So what's going to happen is once you've spent your money, you're going to go to your lender and say, I'd like to be forgiven. And the lender is going to have their process. Some of our very small lenders are taking hard copy documents. Some of our larger lenders have actually created an electronic portal for you to submit your information through. So you go to your local lender and say, I want to be forgiven. EIDL advances are no longer deducted from a PPP loan forgiveness payment, so that's fantastic. Expenses paid with PPP loans are federally tax deductible. Again, we expanded the forgivable expenses that are permissible, and we have a very simple forgiveness application for loans what were under $150,000. In addition, the forgiven PPP loans are not federally taxable as income. All right, so the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. There's quite a few businesses in Livingston County who have contacted me about this program. As many of you may be aware, we opened our portal for this program and it crashed. So we took a timeout. We took, I don't know, a few weeks to say, wait a minute, it was broken. We need to fix it. What can we do? So I believe it opened on Monday for processing of these grants, and they are true grants. And so the maximum grant available is $10 million. Eligible entities are live venues, operators or promoters, theatrical producers, if you're live performing arts organization, motion picture theater operators, museums, zoos, aquariums, talent representatives, but you had to have been in business prior to February 29th, 2020. And you can't have received a PPP loan. All right, so that's the key there. This is all done electronically as well on SBA's system. So the more that we can do these electronically, the faster that we'll be able to produce them, because frankly, we simply don't have enough staff for the millions of applications that are coming in through these programs. All right, so we've been doing a significant amount of Restaurant Revitalization Fund webinars for the past 2 weeks. There's a lot of information out there, so I chose today just to kind of keep it pretty generic. Laura and I are going to be doing another webinar specifically targeting the Restaurant Revitalization Fund in a few weeks, so we can get you lots of information there. But in the meantime, the difference with the RRF is SBA is also approving these loans, but they aren't going through our disaster office. So the EIDL loan and the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant are going through our disaster office. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund is actually going through our side of this SBA. So hopefully for you, that means that we can answer some more of the specific questions if you have them. So the big news, if you haven't heard before, if you are applying for the RRF, our portal is open today. It's at restaurants.sba.gov, and you can register your business. We're actually not going to accept applications until Monday, but if you'd like to get a head start just on the registration component, you can do that. Again, that's restaurants.sba.gov. So let's talk about who's eligible. Businesses that are not permanently closed, right? And where the public or patrons assemble for the primary purpose of being served food or drink. Getting a lot of questions about permanently closed. No, I closed because I couldn't find enough staff during COVID, or I closed because I didn't feel comfortable having my business open because of COVID. As long as you're going to reopen and utilize these funds on your business itself, you're not permanently closed, okay? So who's eligible? Restaurants, food stands, food trucks, food carts, caterers, bars, saloons, lounges, taverns, snacks and non-alcoholic beverage bars. Some of the questions I'm getting is, hey, I have a yoga studio, but we also serve smoothies and sandwiches. You're not eligible because your primary purpose is not being served food or drink, okay? Or I'm a small town grocery store. Well, your primary purpose is not serving food or drink. Even though that's what you are selling, you're not serving it. So that's not eligible. So when someone's asking me if they're eligible, I go back to, is your primary purpose being served food or drink? Now, if you can see the slides well enough, I apologize for this small font, but you have all these stars, and you look at those stars, and it's the bakeries, the brew pubs, the tap rooms, the breweries, the wineries, the inns. Why are there stars? They're stars because we want to make sure that 33% of your gross receipts were actually from on-site sales. Many of our businesses had to pivot during COVID, right? You could only do wholesale business, right? You had to shut down, or it was the middle of winter and you couldn't build out your outside service. So we want to make sure that in the time before COVID, you had at least 33% of your sales to on-site. So that's why there's little asterisks on those. Who is not eligible for RRF? If it's a state or local government operated business, if as of March 13th, 2020, you own or operate more than 20 locations. If you're familiar with SBA lending, you are aware that usually that follows the owner. Our rules follow the owner, but that's not what this is. This rule follows the business. So if the business has multiple locations, you own 21 Dunkin' Donuts, that's not going to be eligible. You own 17 financial service companies and 4 restaurants, you're not going to be eligible because you own more than 20 locations. Or you own 3 delis, you would be eligible because if they're the delis that serve people. So it's all about the locations. You're ineligible if you've received a shuttered venue operator grant. Can't have both. If you're a publicly traded company, if you're permanently closed, if you're a nonprofit organization. So I'm getting these questions. I'm an American Legion and multiple times a week I sell food. Nope, you're a nonprofit. I'm a church. On Friday nights, we do fish fry during Lent. No, you're a nonprofit, not eligible. I've gotten some questions from Livingston County businesses who say, well, you know, I haven't been in business. I opened my doors during COVID because I'm very brave. Am I eligible? In this case, yes, you are. As long as you were having expenses for your business prior to March 11th, 2021, you're eligible. Now, why did I just make that caveat? Because some of you have to put in expenses before you can actually start your business. You want to buy a food truck. You want to own a food truck. You have to buy the food truck. You have to make sure it's up to code. You have to buy your supplies. You have to get your permits. You have to do all these things before you can even drive it to wherever you want to drive it to open the door, right? As long as you started expending funds on your business that's eligible prior to March 11th of 2021, right? So a month and a half ago, you are eligible for this program. So that hopefully will help a lot of our businesses that maybe had those caveats earlier and weren't eligible to receive the other assistance. And what happened? There we go. Okay. So I made this cute little chart. It's not very pretty, but the idea is here are the 4 different programs we just talked about. And I know that Laura is recording this, and I'm happy to convert the PowerPoint over to the PDF so that you can have it later. But if you take a look at this chart, it really goes down to here are the 4 different programs and what matters. So let's take a look at the PPP because some of you still are eligible for second draws. If you have a first draw, you may be eligible for a second. You cannot apply for a PPP if you've received a shuttered venue operator grant, but you may have an EIDL and a PPP. You just can't use them for the same purpose. If you apply for a restaurant relief fund, we will subtract your PPP loan from your RRF amount. So here's a real simple documentation. So you apply for a restaurant relief fund. You were in business in 2019 and you stayed in business, you're not closed. You calculate your gross receipts, and the difference in your gross receipts between 2019 and 2020 is $100,000. Okay, so in theory, $100,000 should be your restaurant relief fund. However, you also received 2 PPP draws, both of which were for $30,000. So you had $60,000 of Paycheck protection money. You will subtract that 60,000 from that 100. So then your restaurant relief amount would be $40,000. That's simply how that works. So you can have a PPP and an EIDL and an RRF. It just is a matter of how that all flows through with the amount of funds. All right, here are our friendly neighborhood, how you stay in contact with us. We actually put out a newsletter every week. If that's something that you're interested in, you can either sign up on a national level or you can go down to the Rochester office. We technically report up to Buffalo, so a lot of times you're going to see some cross-reference to webinars or other things that are Buffalo and Rochester, but we can help you no matter what. We have our Twitter handle, excuse me, we have Instagram, and this is my email. That is my direct line, and one of the fabulous things that we've learned during COVID is when you call me, it rings on my computer, and it rings on my cell phone, it rings on my desk, so no matter where I am, you're going to be able to find me. This is also the website. Each of our programs have their own special URL, but I've determined that it's easier just to say, go to sba.gov coronavirus relief, and all the programs are going to be there. So with that, Laura, I think that's the end of the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing and move forward with what you were thinking.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Virginia, for that great information. As I check the general chat and the Q&A, it doesn't look like we have any questions for the collective. So as I said, when we come back out of present mode and into the table settings, Virginia will be available. You'll see her little icon, her avatar.
I'm going to try my best. Don't like move myself around.
Yeah. So if a table gets filled up, please just be patient. When you see a seat open at that table, we can pop in and ask questions. And again, Virginia, thank you so much for the presentation and for making yourself so available to our Livingston County businesses here. This is such a critical time, and your availability to them and conveying all of the information is critically important. So we thank you very much for that. And with that, we're going to come back into the present mode or to the table mode. And again, just remember along the bottom screen to turn on your camera and microphone so that you can fully experience the interaction. Here we go.